And you were an atheist. That was probably disconcerting at best, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, when Carl passed away, and I just I felt tossed into the void around, because I didn't have a sense of a God or a sense of comfort. It was a very sad and scary and lonely place, and I hurt. I got really depressed. But within probably 6 weeks, I had the first of what became many visitations of Carl's spirit in my dreams.
Wow.
And so I would wake up from one of these visits, and I would be lying there, kind of half awake, and I would think, oh man, it was so cool seeing Carl.
Right, especially because you're like a fellow tripper, right? Anybody who likes to trip probably likes people coming in their dreams. Me, not so much. You want to talk to me, send me a letter. Don't show up in my dreams and freak me out. But interesting that you like that.
He didn't freak me out at all.
Yeah.
It was this opening, because I had lots of feelings and sensations and some very powerful experiences with psychedelics, including getting into the Akashic records and so on. But I still really didn't have that much of a context. Ram Dass was just getting started with his lecturing and talking, so and
right.
Timothy Leary was talking
fringy.
about stuff, so it was very
fringy.
Where are we?
Yeah, and if you wanted to be on a spiritual path back then, you were in a fringe group of people that were ostracized in a kind of way, right? You weren't going to do mainstream. You had to pick one or the other.
That's right. And I picked fringe. I picked
All the way.
experiments early on.
Okay.
So during that summer, I really started looking at the spiritual world. And you could call it grasping at straws, I suppose, but I got into the tarot. I started trying to find ways to communicate with Carl, although the most reliable ones seemed to be in my dreams. But the thing of it is, I still didn't have a handle on my emotions. So later that summer, I found myself starting to really like cold beer. And of course, alcohol is the most wonderful numbing agent known to man in a whole lot of ways. And so I took to alcohol like a Rottweiler takes to the postman.
That's nice.
So I
Not like a fish to water, okay? So I'm going to assume you got into a little bit of trouble with some alcohol.
Well, it was personal trouble. For some reason, I think I actually know why now, but turns out I was greatly blessed that I never got caught driving drunk. I never hurt anybody. I was not a mean drunk. I just drank to excess more or less continuously for 33 years. I quit almost 8.5 years ago now.
Right.
And that was my way of coping. So I wasn't doing speed anymore. I wasn't shooting drugs anymore.
Right.
I mean, alcohol, you can buy that in the store, right?
So how do we do heavy amounts of alcohol while we're on a spiritual path? How did that work out for you?
I like to use the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, right.
I would go to retreats later on, especially getting into my 40s and so on. Started doing spiritual retreats and would be on Maui for a week and be completely substance free.
Yeah, but you'd be high on metaphysics.
Yeah.
Right, metaphysical junkie.
Yeah.
Different juice, but
when I wrote Drunk with Wonder and I called it Drunk with Wonder, I went right to Hafez and Rumi and their beautiful poetry about being intoxicated with God.
Absolutely.
I really love this idea of being head over heels, of really being
with
passionate
everything.
with life and with God, with goddess, with however you want to language it, with each moment, really.
Would you say, because I've had this conversation with many people, and somebody in this room knows exactly what I mean, but would you say that alcohol is just like trying to mainline God, right? It's quicker, you think, the ego tells you it's quicker, because it's immediate, right? You have a drink, you get warm, and you go there. Versus on the spiritual journey, you sit, you breathe, you wait, it's a little slower, it's not as immediate for somebody, a seeker on the path, right? Hence, perhaps why, when we aren't at a workshop or reading a book that's giving us some juice, that we fill in the gaps with alcohol.
In fact, I actually found part of my journey in looking at why and how I could go a week without anything and feel really great, and then get out of that experience, and I couldn't wait to have a drink.
Yes.
And I figured, I started thinking that there was something really juicy in that place, and if I could just figure out what that was, then I would be able to let go of using substances to be in the level of consciousness that I wanted to be in.
Right, and for those of you tuning in right now, we're talking with Steve Ryals about his book, Drunk with Wonder. And for anybody out there that knows this dance, I call it the awake asleep dance. You know, we love to medicate, whether it's through metaphysics, through whatever. We like the juice. We like the juice of new relationship. We get these neural loops of excitement, right, that we keep reaching for until we do what you've done, Steve, which is drop deeper into the conversation, go down the rabbit hole. What's this all about? As a matter of fact, you talk about the personas a little bit later in your book, the different identities that we create, that the ego creates to protect ourselves. It's one of my favorite conversations. But before we get there, let's pause for just a minute and not digress, but turn left and point out the fact that you spent 30 some odd years back and forth with this dance, with alcohol, with self-discovery. Would you say that you would do it all again, right? Knowing what you know now, would you have spent those 30 years the way you spent them?
That's a great question, Maryanne. I feel strongly
Thank
that
you.
I feel it's one of the most powerful questions that we can really get into, actually. That once we begin to understand that every single experience we've ever had has brought us to right here and right now, and if we love and appreciate who we are now and where we are now and what we're doing, assuming, for example, that we're following our passion, that we're living the life of our dreams, that I've gotten to the point, and I think every awakened person I've ever spoken to or read about or heard says the same exact thing, that we wouldn't change anything because that would change this moment. And this moment is perfect.
We come back after the break. We're going to talk about the next moment in